Welcome back to the Breaking News Bears podcast. My name is Mateo Ruiz, and today I'll be hosting our discussion about the upcoming CBA negotiations with Evan Davis and Mario Russo. Boys, thanks for joining me today.
We're coming on. It's been a tough day.
It's been a tough day. It's been a tough day indeed. For those of you who are watching this, obviously a little bit later, we've just reached the end of Major League Baseball's CBA negotiations, and unfortunately, it's no deal. The players and the owners couldn't come to an agreement, and we're going to be discussing and sort of breaking down a little bit of what those discussions entailed over the last month. We have an update to the CBA negotiations. Both sides came very close to an agreement last night, the last day of February 28th, and they agreed to push the deadline that MLB had created by a day further to 5 p.m. today. Unfortunately, the owners have stood pretty firm in their demands, and they've stated that they're fine with missing up to a month of the season. And some players have suggested that they're going to be looking for work outside of MLB if that's the case. We've seen a lot of players sort of sound off about their disdain for the league right now and sort of how offended they feel. We'll start with you, Mario. If you're a player in this situation, how are you sort of feeling about the way Major League Baseball has treated you?
Well, you're definitely not happy. And I mean, personally, today I just got a new haircut just because I wanted to hint a little bit of luck, maybe in a new beginning, get ready for that, sort of feeling. But it was nothing but the case. If I'm a player, I'm really searching for something else to do. I have no clue when this is going to be met. You would think that with all these negotiations and the promise that it showed last night and the last few nights of that, you thought it was going to be a better and promising result. But no, that is not the case. So if I'm a player, I'm definitely looking at my options. They're all on the table. Maybe, I'm not going to say maybe baseball is not the option because they're professional baseball players. They're getting paid to do things. And I'm sure a season is going to come underway. But in the meantime, you don't know how long it's going to take. And MLB is not giving you any reason to believe it's going to be sooner rather than later. So definitely if you're a player in the situation, you're going out and evaluating all the options on the table.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen guys like Bryce Harper sort of poke fun at it on his Instagram story, but there's the whole idea of him calling up the Japanese or the Nippon Professional Baseball Association in Japan and asking if they've got any open spots on their teams. Now, I'm sure that was a joke, obviously, but you might start to see players start to look elsewhere for something to do while they wait for the owners to sort of come to terms with it. Because as of now, there's no date for the resumption of discussions. Evan, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about one of your own players, Walker Buehler. He's been on Twitter a little bit lately, trying to incite some support for the players, and he's made a few comments. Would you like to discuss them a little bit?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I understand it. Walker Buehler's a household name, at least in the LA area. He's been one of the clutchest pitchers for the Dodgers in the recent years, a huge reason why we were able to win a championship back in 2020. And I think the one thing that people don't understand is, yes, MLB players make a lot of money, but Walker Buehler still doesn't really make a lot compared to Max Scherzer, Garrett Cole, guys that are making like $38, $43 million. Walker Buehler's still on that rookie contract. So he's making about like 1.8 million, which is still fair money. But if that salary goes down even more, LA's expensive, and you got to think that already half of that money is going to Uncle Sam and the agent, and he was just absorbing his frustration that, look, I know we're very comfortable in our position, but it's still their jobs. They have a right to voice how they feel, and I don't think anyone should be attacking them for it. And I think it would be more fair to attack if it was someone like a Max Scherzer, guys that are making a lot of money, but Walker Buehler still hasn't gotten his payday yet. And right now, we just don't know his financial situation. Although he is in the MLB, that doesn't mean you're comfortable necessarily.
And just to add on to Evan's point, Mateo, it's interesting that you look at a guy like Bryce Harper, Max Scherzer. We were discussing him, how much money he's been making. And I realized there was a number, and I think you sent it to our group chat, Evan, a couple of days ago or something like that, where he's losing a certain amount of money every day that the season goes on. And it's a pretty hefty fee. It's something I'd make more than my life.
350 grand for Scherzer, 180 for Garrett Cole.
And those big time players are making big time money. Some might even argue way too much money, but you don't hear them talking too much, which is really interesting considering a guy like Walker Buehler. He's kind of, I wouldn't say running his mouth, that's for maybe a lack of a better term, but stirring the pot a little bit. I know he took a little bit of a shot at just regular people or someone wouldn't really understand. I'm not a big fan of that one because, it's all there's a big difference between regular people and yourself, Walker Bueller. There's you got God-given talents. Not everyone on the world has these same God-given talents that can make them that much money. So soon you see that the guys with the big paychecks at the end of the day are not being as vocal as I would have thought. And I mean, it just goes to show if you got the money in your back pocket, you're going to keep silent until anything else crazy happens, right?
Well, actually, not to discredit Max Scherzer, but from what I've heard, he's actually been involved in the discussions. I don't know if he's actually having a negotiation role, but I think he's sort of taking a,
And I'm sure
in the same way that Chris Paul is with the NBA and their Players Association. He's been sort of that kind of individual in this deal. So Max Scherzer has been involved, but
yeah, he's in Jupiter, Florida, with like the negotiations. Like he's there, Garrett Cole's there. Guys,
a lot of the guys that are highest paid are on the floor, because obviously this does affect their interests more so than other players. But there's a lot of things being discussed, for the little guys. There's conversations about increasing the luxury tax threshold to maybe raise the minimum salary. There's conversations about arbitration. Maybe it's too long. Maybe players aren't paid fairly on arbitration. So there's a lot of stuff that affects a breadth of players instead of just like the top guys, like people want to talk about. And so it's just how this issue sort of being framed as like, millionaires versus billionaires. But that's not the case, because as we know, minor leaguers are paid, not well for the amount of money that they do bring into the system and the amount of money that MLB is actually worth. So there are people who are fighting for a living wage in this situation. There are people that are fighting for their worth. And then unfortunately you have people that are, can be seen as greedy and a little bit, gluttonous for money, and for lack of a better word, like the Max Scherzers and like the Garrett Coles, who are, topping up on their already massive salaries. Whether they deserve it or not is a completely different story. But I'd like to explore the idea that, for those of you who don't know, the players and Major League Baseball, they knew this decision was going to have to come. They knew, and they were preparing for it ever since the World Series. But Major League Baseball refused to negotiate for about 6 weeks to 2 months before MLB even put out an official offer. So I want to ask you guys, how ethical do you think it is that the owners refuse to initiate these negotiations until almost 2 months, and then they're now setting artificial deadlines for, if we don't get a deal done by 5 p.m. today, we got to push the season back? For me, that doesn't really resonate, but Mario, I can tell you have something to say for that. Let's hear it.
I just don't see a lot of care. I don't know if I'm being a little like not on the correct side of things here, but I don't see a big effort being put into this. They're kind of treating it like it's a nonchalant thing. That's all. We'll get it down the road. We'll pick it up. We'll kick that can down there and see what it's like when we get there. And they're there, and nothing has been resolved whatsoever. You can credit the reason why this deadline isn't met, because not both parties don't have a chance, nor do they have the opportunity to bring forth what they want and put it in, I wouldn't just say words, but put it forward and get everything constructed and concrete. The fact that the MLB took, what do you got here? 2 months to create an I believe, what is it? 2 months to start getting the ball rolling?
Just short of 2 months.
Yeah, something around there. Like I don't think you see that in any other league. I think it's something that every other league is obviously going to pay attention for. If something like this were to happen, say the NHL, for example, were to bring in the situation where they've been in a couple lockouts, but nothing as extreme. If something like this were to happen, they wouldn't react the same way. So not only is it setting a precedent for the leagues to come, it's just a really bad look on Major League Baseball. And Rob Manfred, this guy's getting a lot of criticism, and a lot of it is just warranted, and he's self-inflicted, might I add. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. I don't really like the fact they wasted 2 months, because that 2 months could have gone down to providing a helpful resource, a helpful way to now get to that point where we're finally playing baseball, something that all the fans like. And it's a shame. I really want to see baseball just like you guys do, but that's my 2 cents on the little delay that they've been causing.
Yeah, it throws you back to sort of I don't know if you guys saw the soundbite last night of, Rob Manfred in the parking lot, somebody asking him, why isn't negotiations happening? Like, why can't we play baseball? And, his answer was, we're trying, right? And it just makes you question if they really were trying, if this really is them trying, or if this is the owners trying to, push this onto the players and put a little pressure on them strategically by making up these fake deadlines and starting negotiations on their terms and all that stuff. Evan, I don't know if you have anything to add to that conversation, but
well, yeah, I mean, like, Mary, I don't know but like, remember when the NHL lockout happened, they missed half the season.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They only played 41 of the games. So like, I think that'd be the worst thing for Major League Baseball, because it's already hard for a lot of teams to drive fans in. We've seen at least like the lower 15 teams that are in the MLB, their attendance levels are anywhere between like 8,000 and 20,000. Like, it's not great. And I think by lowering the season and starting in June and July, like when people are on vacation and stuff, now it's going to be even harder to like build your fan base back up again. That's like just a little hypothesis or like hyperbole there. I don't know, but like it something there. But it's stupid because like I've heard that like the MLB owners like they just didn't even like contact any players, like didn't say anything. And I remember like when the official lockout started, that was like what, December 4th or so, like 5th or 6th,
Something like that, yeah.
something like that. Now it's March, for like, holy crap, time flies insanely. But it's just like they needed to say something. The negotiations should not have started like only 10 days ago. Like something should have started if you, I mean, at least by December 10th. Like you got to start something. You want to take a break for Christmas and New Year's, that's fine, and then you get back to it in middle of January. I think this was poor execution, and it's like the owners, why do they care? They have money. I mean, that's how they're able to afford to own a team.
Yeah, and at the same time, it's no secret that the least valuable baseball for the owners happens in April, May
Mhm.
sort of thing. It's the time when you get the least viewership with baseball. You're competing with a bunch of other sports, and the games don't really matter as much because, as we know, it's a very long season. So if the owners are going to miss any part of the season, they're going to want to miss this much. And
Can I say
they've
one
been,
thing?
yeah.
Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
I actually like, I think when you were bringing that up, I think it is good because I honestly do think that the Major League Baseball season is way too long. Like, I think I understand that they're playing the same team 3 times back to back to back, or sorry, same team 3 times back to back to back, or a day off in between. But it is hard. It is hard watching or even paying attention to 162 games in a season. And I hope this actually does start them to shorten the season. Like if you want to still have baseball in October, because that's like the hotspot month, but I don't know. Like even if you had 130 games, I think that's just easier because as a Dodger fan, like yes, I pay attention to the record from time to time, but I can't like I don't care about some of the games because I just can't pay attention. Like it's just not worth the time. I think this could actually be a good thing. And I think it would actually increase viewership because it makes it more like limited, not being like, oh, it's just one game I'm missing. There's 161 others, but that's just my opinion right
And
now.
Yeah.
how do you guys see teams reacting and if the situation goes towards the season gets like shortened to maybe like Evan saying 130, maybe even 125, 120 games? What does that change in regards to how a team approach the season? Is it more now? We all believe baseball is more of a marathon than a sprint, but does it get a little bit more closer towards the sprint where you have to get going out the gate? Because I remember the condensed season that we saw, I believe in 2020, everyone was trying to get a good footing out. I believe a couple teams that ended up getting pretty well off at the beginning of the year. They went on to succeed in the postseason and had some journeys within that. But what is this? How do the heads shift towards now 162 games or 160, whatever it is, that many games? Now you're condensing the schedule so much further. Like, do you see different planning within the teams, how they're going to approach it, how the deadline is maybe going to shape out? Because I know that's one of the biggest topics in regards to the baseball season. Well, I want to hear your thoughts and also Evan as well, because there's also another pretty interesting subset that we could explore as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Evan said, every game matters more in a shortened
Yeah.
season. And obviously, it's not to the extent that the 60-game season, sort of what we saw, but, every game matters more. And you're going to see, maybe pitchers coming out on shorter rest, maybe 4-man rotations instead of 5-man rotations like we're used to seeing. And you're going to see players playing more games because they want to get their counting stats up, because those are the fuel for future negotiations, especially in arbitration. Unfortunately, the way baseball legislation works is that, players have to be paid off of merit. And not unfortunately, but unfortunately, in a shortened season, they have to be paid off of merit. And that merit's going to be compared to full length seasons and the quality production that you get in full length seasons. And so it's going to mean a lot for those bottom level players, those younger players that are just breaking into the league. They're going to have to play more games and potentially put themselves at risk trying to put up those counting stats if they want to get paid.
Yeah, I disagree with you there. I think the one issue that we're seeing, especially with pitchers, is Tommy John surgery. We're seeing. I mean, we just saw last year. I don't know how many, but I know like Dustin May, Tommy John, and he's only what, 24. Like, and he just broke into the league, and we've seen issues. I think like James Shields, didn't he have? If I'm not mistaken, didn't he have Tommy John a little like
I believe so.
2015 or something like that? Like, this could be this could actually help solve injuries. I mean, we're even looking at guys like Christian Yelich and Cody Bellinger, who won the MVP in 2019 and then, back to back. They're been struggling ever since they won the MVP. And I think it is due to the fact that there's way too many games. And I disagree with the whole 4-man rotation. I think you keep the 5-man rotation. You that way that pitchers can like they can just breathe. Like they're throwing 100 pitches at 90 miles an hour and above. I think the issue is that there is too many games. Uh, I think if you did keep it at 130, it will actually limit the amount of injuries and huge injuries. Like Tommy John's a serious injury. A lot of guys don't come back the same after Tommy John. It's like tearing your ACL in basketball. I think this could actually be better. And I don't think this would affect arbitration in the way you're thinking. I think it would almost benefit it because now you're like, this guy's durable. He has the longevity in order for us to play in a 130 game season. Because if a pitcher's injured and is going into arbitration, he's not going to make any money. Like I think it would just be better if it was shortened.
And I want to also, I don't know if we have these numbers that are disposable or anything, or I doubt you guys have these anything pulled up because I certainly don't. But I always wanted to wonder, like, how many injuries were there within that shortened season, that 60 game sprint? Because you look at players, you look at guys who are just, you get thrown to the wolves. You got no preparation coming in, or I wouldn't say no, but very little preparation. Spring training is very cut short. It's all that kind of stuff. And you just get thrown into playing 60 games straight consecutively, no break in between. So I don't know, maybe if that, I don't know, like, obviously I could be completely wrong, but maybe there's some charts or something that shows how much injuries have played a role in the amount of games you're playing. And I'm sure on, as obvious as it sounds, needless to say this, but injuries are going to happen more and more as you increase the schedule, as the games are higher and higher, 164, 162 games, you're going to have more injuries. But I do wonder how that's going to play out in respect to, like, maybe it's 120, 130 games if it comes down to that. And are the injuries going to fluctuate like that? It is an interesting thing. It's tough to look at, stuff to pay attention. And it's about the way you look at it. Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I think the injury rates in the shortened season are also kind of due to the, the fact that the league was just stopped and started on a time like that. Like
exactly.
we had it was like a 2-week summer camp or whatever they called it
Yeah.
when they had to get everything going. And you saw pitchers and batters alike were just dropping like flies in the first few weeks. And, that really affected some teams. It really put some teams in a bit of a tailspin when some of their better pitchers went down, and it crushed a lot of depth, and it forced a lot of players to come up from who weren't even playing in minor league games, who were playing in a major league complex at a minor league stadium because they couldn't actually play against other teams because that wasn't safe enough for like health guidelines. So these were players who missed a spring training and have not played against another player now coming up and expected to play at full strength in big league competition. And it's a lot to ask from players. And so whether that was more of an impact of the shortened season or more of an impact on, the summer camp sort of short start, I guess is yet to be seen. But it'll be really interesting to see how it affects sort of players' health in the long term for sure. Yeah. And the CBA, we've had a lot of different, proposals that have been agreed upon from last night. I mean, it looks like the universal DH is going to be coming to the league for better, for worse. We will obviously discuss that a little further. We've got a 12-team playoff to look forward to. And we've got the luxury tax, minimum salary, and other issues that are sort of the blockade right now that players can't really, get past. There's been a lot of disparity. I mean, I think the last time I checked, the league wants the luxury tax this year to sit somewhere around 120 million, and the players are looking for it to be somewhere near 140 million, and they're way apart. They're way apart by around, I think, about 60 million by the end of 2026 or something like that. So we've got a long way to go when discussions do start again. But we've seen the players be a little flexible, and the league as well, to their credit, be a little flexible as well. Moving on to the universal DH. This has been obviously a hot button issue in the last couple of years, and I know we've got some very opinionated people on this panel ready to talk about it. A few AL fans, a few NL fans. Let's get started with Evan. What's your opinion on the universal DH?
All right, I'm gonna be short and brief with this one, but I love it because you watch American League baseball, so you guys are lucky. You get to see offense. We have offense in the National League. I think that, whatever, Mario. Your team sucks anyway. The issue that I have with pitchers hitting is that it honestly it disintegrates your 7 and 8 hitter, because the only way you're gonna get offense from them is if they hit back-to-back doubles, home run, triple. Like they have to be your power hitters. I would almost put like Trey Turner and Cody Bellinger at the 7 and 8 spot, because I would get more offense out of that than if I put them at the 1 and 4 spot. Because the pitcher just is an automatic out, basically. Like, how many pitchers are actually really caring about hitting? You're pitching, like, the pitcher is pitching to like a tutor or whatever, like just a mannequin. And like, besides like Madison Bumgarner and maybe like Clayton Kershaw from time to time, how many pitchers are really hitting in the National League? Like, it's most likely a guaranteed out, but it leads more to that for me. I think it also derails confidence, because let's just, like, hypothetically, let's say you're down 3-2, bottom of the 6th inning, 2 outs, there's a runner on second and third, and your pitcher is up. Like, 9 times out of 10, he ain't getting that run in, and now you just completely lost a shot at either tying the game or taking the lead. And then your confidence just demoralizes, because you're like, damn, if the pitcher wasn't in that spot, like, we could be winning this game. So that's why I think it's good for the National League to have it, because it just makes it unfair that one league has it, like one conference or league has it and the other one doesn't. I just think, like, if you want to differentiate the two, I don't think run production should be the thing, because that's a huge difference in, like, terms of standings and where teams are come playoff time, and especially in the World Series. Now it's based on who has the better record of the two leagues, and it makes it harder.
Yeah, one thing I will say about the World Series is it did afford a little bit of, disparity in the home advantage sort of aspect, because the AL team is built to contain a DH more or less, and the NL team is sort of just throwing a player who doesn't have a ton of DH experience. And we've seen in the past how that can affect a lot of players. The idea that you're really only getting up and moving around 3-4 times a game, and you don't have to go out there and you don't have to play defense every day. Not every player can handle that, and so that I always felt that was some sort of like competitive balance to add to the home field advantage in the World Series, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I like the DH. But I'd like to see what Mario has to say about this.
Yeah, so I mean, I found the a National League, and I know this is a whole universal DH is the battle between the American League and the National League. Growing up, I loved the National League. I fell in love with it simply because I could hop on MLB on any given day and hit with my pitcher, and that was probably the coolest thing growing up as a little kid. But no, I love the NL just because it added a little bit more flavor within the game style that we were so used to seeing. I've watched so many Jays games, obviously, growing up, and it was just, all right, you get to the designated hitter, you're ready to see something happen. Now you switch to the NL, it's a totally different game. You're worrying about strategy, how to deal with it. And then as you grow a little bit older and you kind of see how the game plays out on both sides, you sort of realize how pointless it sort of is in having a DH in one and a DH in other. And I love pitchers who rake as much as the next guy, but it just seems a little bit weird that now it's happening, because I think it should have been something done quite a while ago. I think it's just better for the game. You're going to see a lot more offense, and we all know how much fans love driving offense. They had to inject these things with some weird serum to get a little bit more viewership going up, but no, I think it's going to be better for the game of baseball. The old school fans aren't going to like it. We already talked about this a little bit briefly on other shows, old rationalist or whatever, traditionalist versus new rationalist, something like that. And I mean, I know the traditionalists aren't going to like this one bit, because they love seeing things change. Or sorry, they don't like seeing things change. And this is a huge change going to happen at the game. It's going to be impacting. I know you're probably going to touch about it in just a bit, Mateo, what players make. It's going to be a huge bargaining chip for the players in the future, especially this offseason once it resumes. And I know we talked extensively in our last couple of weeks when we're going over all these teams, but I think it's a great thing for the game of baseball. I think it's something that we're finally seeing happen after a lot of anticipation, and something that maybe should have happened maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago. But no, it's a new chapter in baseball. We've seen how it reacted. I believe the DH was in the shortened season, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So we saw how well that reacted. I loved it personally. It added a new flavor to the game, but again, at the same time, it's taking a little bit of that flavor away, the little bit that maybe stood the NL a little bit separately than the AL. So you're losing a bit of an X factor, but you're gaining something that I don't think a lot of GMs or management is complaining about. But what do I know?
Yeah, definitely none of the players are complaining about it. I can say that for sure. But it's interesting that you mentioned the shortened season as sort of like a bit of a trial run for this. And I'd be interested to see, I don't know if we sort of have the numbers for that.
I have the stats right now. Like, it's actually interesting. So it's not like it is a pretty huge drop off. Like, so in the 2020 shortened season, The top two teams, in terms of, I looked at just home runs and RBIs, and the top two teams in that category were both from the National League, the Dodgers and the Braves. And then so they were the only two teams that also hit over 100 home runs in that season. And they were the only two teams to have 325 plus RBIs. So I think like when you look at it, you can see, and I do agree, like the National League doesn't have players that are built for like the designated hitter role, but
they don't have a need for it, right?
Yeah, they have the respectable bench players that are basically doing their role just more frequently, and they don't have to also do it every day, because one day it could be Chris Taylor, and another day it could have been Jock Peterson, and another day it could be Albert Pujols. Like it doesn't really matter. So, but yeah, it is like the NL, once they had the designated hitter, run production started going up for like the top heavy teams.
And guys, this is a new thing for like this just DH, and we're going to talk about so many other things about the CBA agreements and what's coming on, but this is a new thing for baseball. Baseball's never going to be the same. It's never going to be like it was 2, 3, even last year. Starting 2022, baseball's gonna be forever changed. This is a moment in time where I know we're gonna critique it because we just want the game back, but once it comes back, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be totally different. You're not going to remember. You're going to take it a little bit for granted. Like I guarantee you're going to take that NL guy, the pitcher stepping up and seeing a pitcher bomb. You're never going to see it again. And it's
I'm good with that.
I mean, but those little moments where the absolutely unexpected happens from the 9 spot, and you got a pitcher who just bloops one over left field and the run scores, all that crazy stuff. Clayton Kershaw getting thrown in onto the field because they have no hitters left. Baseball is going to be changed forever. And I think it's synonymous with what we're going to talk about all throughout the show and in the upcoming weeks about what's going to be happening with these deadlines. That this is new for all of us. This is new for baseball, and I'm all here for it. I want to see this game grow a little bit more. And I think from the universal DH to tie that point in, I think we're going to do exactly that.
Yeah, and there's going to be some big changes in baseball, that's for sure. I just before we move on to sort of who the biggest winners are in this sort of conversation, I'd like to touch on something that Evan said about sort of it's going to affect the way that, you know, the way that National League teams are composed, essentially. And he's right. You're not going to see these bench bats that are going to be used for pinch hitting appearances. Pinch hitting and DHing are two very different games. It's very different mental preparations. It's very different expectations out of a pinch hitter and a DH. And you're probably going to end up seeing teams carry maybe an extra pitcher, maybe reduce their bench by 1 spot and carry an extra arm in that bullpen, just because there's not going to be a need to have a rotation of 3 guys that can come in and pinch hit, maybe a lefty, maybe a switch hitter, maybe an infielder, maybe an outfielder. You're not going to need all that because you're going to have your 9 locked in, and you're going to be able to sub out your pitchers as needed. And it's going to be really interesting to see. It's obviously going to create a lot of jobs for 15 lucky players who get to be the DH, but it's also going to take away some roles of guys who have made a living out of pinch hitting.
Can I say one thing?
Sure.
Like, again, about my team, how much of more of a steal is that Chris Taylor deal at 15 million, given that, I mean, he's not the same name brand, but Nick Castellanos basically does the same role as him. And he's probably going to get like, what, 20 million a year now if this universal DH is in effect. Like, how much more valuable do some of these guys like become? Like, the super utility man is now probably going to be the most valuable free agent, like player type that we've seen.
Yeah, and just the idea of like the traditional DH, especially in the AL over the last few years, we've seen us sort of been a little bit, you know, thrown out the window in favor of a spot to maybe give somebody a rest day from defense. And it's a little bit more of a utility spot in itself, that it's not just your typical like 300-pound slugger that you know is going to hit 50 home runs in a season. It's a very different look for the DH spot, and it's going to be a very different look for the game. And there's going to be a few players who are definitely going to be on very happy about this decision. Free agents like Nicholas Castellanos, Nelson Cruz, Jorge Soler, Chris Davis, even Kyle Schwarber potentially benefiting from it. How dramatically does this change their value, Mario?
I'm looking at some stats now as you were talking. I'm pulling up some stuff from the 2020 season where we saw that universal DH get put into play, more of a trial run. And I'm looking at some guys. And ironically, I didn't think I'd see this, but their positions are actually labeled as DH, which is pretty cool. But you look at a guy like Marcell Ozuna. He's top 3 in OPS. You look at who's another guy? Nelson Cruz, top 10 in OPS. Home runs. Nelson Cruz again, top 10 with 16 home runs that year. The list goes on and on. I don't want to go through all those stats, but you look at like these other guys where maybe they're not up for contracts this offseason. You look at this, how it's going to affect them going into the future with their next contracts. You're going to have just another thing to bargain with in the negotiation process. This is going to change what players make. This is going to change the outlook of what a player's mindset is when he's heading to the ballpark, when he's playing physically in the game. It's going to change just about everything. And I know we talked about it extensively with the Cincinnati Reds last week. Nick Castellanos, he's probably the big fish that we're looking at, where he can very well be suited for a designated hitting role just because his defense is not always complete and it's always so iffy and wishy-washy. But boy, can that guy swing the bat just like many other guys in the MLB can. So this is definitely going to put the game on its head. You're going to see a lot of different contracts being offered, and I don't know if I can go a little bit more into that, but it's going to be interesting to see. And I know we're going to be following it very extensively in the upcoming weeks or when the season resumes.
Yeah, I think a player that we might be forgetting here is Luke Voigt.
That was another one.
Very good. The Yankees are trying to trade because they want to fill in a spot for a Freddie Freeman or Anthony Rizzo. I mean, Luke Voigt hit 22 home runs in that shortened season, and everyone thought that he was like the MVP of the American League. Like, if the Yankees want to trade him, now's kind of like once the CBA is hopefully resolved and this NLDH becomes a reality, I mean, that just broadens the amount of teams that Luke Voigt can be traded to. And it increases his value exponentially because not only can he play first base from time to time, now he can be your DH, which is that's just another huge bat that you're adding into any team. Like if you look at a team like Milwaukee who could use a first baseman, if you have Luke Voigt, and I'm not going to still discredit Christian Yelich, but if you have them going back to back, that's just immense power that makes it very difficult for pitchers to throw around. I mean, those guys are going to be getting paid, and Luke Voigt is going to have a great opportunity somewhere if the Yankees do in fact trade him, which I think they should, because his value is probably going to be the highest it's going to be.
And I mean, I'm looking at two other players just to quickly mention here. Jorge Soler, I believe he's up for a contract this offseason, if I'm not mistaken. Another guy like Jesse Winker, I don't think he's up for a contract, but he had a terrific season last year and in 2020 respectively. So if he can keep it up with the batting side of things, especially to credit this DH rule, this guy could be cashing a lot more money than you would have expected 2-3 years ago when nobody even knew who this guy was. So it just goes to show what the difference this thing can make. If you're going to abuse it, go abuse it, because these hitters can hit.
Yeah, dude, just throw out another name, Daniel Vogelback as well, just coming to mind.
Again. The thick boy.
Up for a contract as well that, might slot into an NL team, because there's going to be 15 open spots looking for a DH. And, they're not going to look identical to what we're expecting from a DH. Some of them are just going to have a bench player in there. It's going to be a revolving door for some people, but some people are going to go spend money on that big free agent. There's going to be a lot of contending NL teams that are going to be in that mix. So I want to ask you guys, what is the NL team that could use the DH the most? We'll start with Evan, maybe.
The team that could use the DH the most? I would say the San Diego Padres. And the reason why I'll say that is because Luke Voigt is still in my mind. And first base just seems like a position that the San Diego Padres need and can use. And although they have Manny Machado and Fernando Tatis, which is a beautiful 1-2 punch, they need something else because the rest of their lineup just can't hit for power. And I know Petco Park isn't the most hitter friendly, but Luke Voigt has enough power where, similar to Nick Castellanos in Detroit, he can hit for doubles, and they still have speedy guys that can generate runs and RBIs for Luke Voigt. And I just think, given now that the Giants are decreasing, it makes it more wide open for the San Diego Padres to possibly get a wild card spot. So I definitely think that they should be a team that be aggressive to get any sort of power.
You guys touched upon it very briefly, or the Milwaukee Brewers, obviously the DH would do wonders to their lineup because they struggle mightily. I believe they're I'm looking at it now, probably the middle of the pack, close to the lower bottom third of the league in offensive stance. I'm looking at OPS, which sort of values the power side of things as well. Milwaukee's a team I look at. The Mets, even, they would, I think, benefit with their goals in mind to take over that National League East. That would be a pretty good acquisition if you could find one solid A1 guy to swat the ball out of the ballpark. Go on, Evan.
The Braves. They have so many free agents leaving. Like,
it brings up an opportunity for them to bring back Soler, right? There's a spot for him now.
And in the
I
same
don't
breath,
know
it puts
though,
up his
because
value too.
Exactly.
no, like that's the thing. Like the one thing I worry about with Jorge Soler is that they overpay him. Like I
Well, he's going
understand.
to get overpaid.
He
That's for
will get
No,
sure.
overpaid.
Yeah.
that's the issue. And I don't think the Braves are in a contending mode. The last thing they want to do is have an overpaying contract
Fair.
on their team. I already thought before this CBA agreement with the NLDH that he was going to get overpaid like 18 million at least. But now I'm thinking it's going to be like 22 because now some teams can be like, oh wow, look what he did against the Astros in the World Series. Like now we can have that every day and we don't have to worry about his defensive fuck ups. Oh.
It's fair.
Blunt with it.
So,
Yeah, right?
I mean, he
Tell us
isn't
how you
great.
really feel.
He's not great defensively, but he is great offensively. So it's like now we only have to worry about one side of the ball.
Yeah, and the
And
Braves obviously thought that his bat outweighed his defense last year, but now a team's not going to have to take that trade.
Yeah, I mean, like
Mhm.
he had like that defensive blunder in center field in the NLCS.
The fact that he was even playing in center field is ridiculous.
I don't even know what his like.
a
I
thing of the
couldn't
past
believe-
now.
No,
Yeah.
I couldn't believe that ball went by him. Like he's not looking at the ball at all. It reminds me of like me when I was playing like 10-year-olds. Like I'm afraid of the baseball. Like
Damn.
now a team only has to worry about him hitting it out of the park. I mean, it drives up his value. And now Atlanta's probably like, fuck, like what are we gonna do?
And I love the point you made, Mateo. This is probably the best point I maybe touched upon in this DH conversation is that
Oh, thanks.
it takes, I know, Evan, I was never going to give you any
I like the
credit.
part where he roasted his 10-year-old self.
That was just as good. But again, I love the part where you're saying it takes a full mental change with all these hitters. Like being a DH is totally different than being a pinch hitter. Being a DH is totally different than being a positional player. You're never going to see Jorge Soler ever field the ball again if this situation plays out as we're all expecting to go. It's just going to be so interesting to see how these players react. And I'm so in for it to see what happens with these players. Is Nick Castellanos even going to benefit from the DH? We all think he is because we're just looking off the surface here about his offensive numbers, how well they soar, but he's had to play the field most of his life, almost all his life. So it's going to be just so fun to see how these guys react. And it's definitely an interesting avenue to explore. I'm so glad you mentioned it as well.
Yeah, for sure. We've seen players that, have been thrown into the DH role because they've been great pinch hitters in the National League and they just couldn't cut it. And, alternatively, we've seen guys like, you remember the beginning of the season that Pablo Sandoval had pinch hitting for Atlanta, right? So
Yeah.
it's similar, but it's also different. And there are players that are going to thrive in the situation, and there are going to be, great pinch hitters that might be out of a job in the next few years because it just doesn't click with them anymore and it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So you're going to see a lot of players trying to adapt and sort of fit their games to meet the new way that the league works. So I want to ask you guys who the biggest winner in this situation is. Is it the players or is it the fans? Are you guys ready to see the DH take the field all over, or you think this is something that is going to be better for the players and maybe increase the product on the field dramatically that way? Or is it a little bit of both? Evan?
The fans.
Yeah.
The fans.
You're into
love it.
I can see.
I love it. I've been wanting this for so long. Like when I first got into baseball, I was like, why doesn't the NL have a DH? And now they do.
No, they do. Problem solved.
Me, it's a little bit. I mean, obviously, it's gonna be a little bit of both. Both teams are gonna both sides are gonna benefit because the fans like Evan here. He just loves to see it. I'm in the exact same boat. I would love to see this come to fruition, and I'm glad it is. And then the players as well. The fans can love it all they want, but they're not making an extra 400 million, but 100, 150 million or 20, whatever. They're not making extra $1 million watching the American League and National League both using universal DH. These players are. So if I'm going to give you one concrete answer, it's obviously going to have to be the players just because they're getting a bigger incentive. Not all of them, but a pretty good portion of them where we've seen the offensive stats thrive in the last couple of years or throughout their career. You're now seeing it now capitalize on that market. And it's only a great thing for the players. And it's great that baseball can finally find a thing amidst this thing where both sides are against each other. We're now finding a thing where fans and players are going to benefit from something very rare that we have not been able to talk about in quite some time.
Yeah, that's for sure. A rare agreement.
Exactly.
But another agreement that we've had, a little bit more contended, but ultimately we've had a bit of a consensus in the last couple of days here is that the MLB is looking to expand their postseason to 12 teams. Originally, they proposed 14. If you guys remember, a few days ago, I think that the deal was 14, and then the players countered with 12. And it looks like that's what it's going to be next year when the season does resume. So that would obviously be six teams from each league. The format yet hasn't really been decided, but we'll touch on that a bit later. Let's hear from Evan. You in favor of
Well,
12
no.
team playoff or
Well,
not?
apparently what happened was that then the MLB went to the Players Association today and said we actually want to do 14 teams.
Oh,
So
really?
I think that was the issue, is like the MLB Players Association's pissed off because they're like, what the hell just happened within the matter of like what they ended
Yeah.
at like midnight 1 a.m. and then they were back 12 hours later. It's like, what just happened? I think I follow like all the insiders.
Mhm.
Like John Heyman was saying that the players are like, you guys just fucked us. Like, what did you just do? And they wanted to go back to 14 teams. It seems like the format was you have 3 wild card teams, you keep the 3 division winners. The second place wild card and the third place wild card will play each other in a 1-game series. The winner of that will play the first place wild card team in a 3-game series. And then the winner of that will play the number 1 division winner. The teams just get a bye, get to relax. Like the division winners just relax, and then it goes into the postseason, which I like a lot more because I don't think you making. I saw a video like making the MLB postseason is already very difficult. Like,
Mhm.
why reward someone making the postseason with a game 7? Like, that seems and anything can happen in baseball. That's why I was so pissed when the Dodgers had to play in the wild card, because it was just like they won 106 games and their reward is a 1-game playoff series that ended up coming down to the 9th inning walk off. Like, that's how close their season was to ending, and they just won 106 games. So I like it more that it's a 3-game series. It does now add more values to pitchers because now you need to have depth at your starting pitching rotation. But I like it. I prefer it because I don't think, and it's not even just from a fan standpoint, it's not fair that they're rewarded with a 1-game playoff series and they were one of the 5 teams in the whole league to make the playoffs.
Yeah, no, for sure. We've seen in the shortened season, we saw 14 teams make the playoffs, 7 from each. And, that sort of led to, obviously, the big story there was the Houston Astros below 500 making the playoffs. And that was this sort of huge deal that, should a below 500 team be able to make the playoffs? And you won't necessarily see that with 12 teams, but it's something that you could see with 14. Mario, I'd like to hear whether or not you think they made the right call with 12 versus 14 or where you'd be at in this
Well,
situation.
I mean, I'm a fan of more baseball at the end of the day. I'm a fan of watching more teams that you're not expecting to see. I love that shortened season just because I got to see the Miami Marlins play a
Yeah.
playoff game. I got to
That
see the
was
Cincinnati. It was a brutal. It was garbage. I think it was
so
Cubbies and Marlins. That one did not age
That
well
was
whatsoever.
so weird.
You go see like Reds and Braves, and the Reds got their handles blown off. But fans, if you're listening, it's a bit of a tightrope. It's a double-edged sword because you can preach all you want, extra teams, and we all love it. But when your number 1 team gets eliminated by a dumpster of a team that shouldn't even be there in the first place, nor would they have been in a regular MLB season without this stuff, then what are you going to say? I mean, it's something that you got to think about, obviously, but I guess that makes the game a little bit more competitive. And at the same time, too, this takes a bit of integrity away from baseball if you look at it the other way, where it's like baseball's one of the hardest, if not the hardest sport in the top 4 or 5 sports in North America to get into a postseason picture. One of them. And now that you're going to expand it, you're making it a little bit more accessible for other teams to squeeze their way in. Look at the NHL, for example, and I know me and Evan cover it so extensively. Like the 8th place team, the difference between the 1st place team and the 8th place team is insurmountable. The 8th place team could barely even be considered a playoff team, but hence they are still in it. And you see so many upsets as a cause of it at many times. So it's again, in a situation where be careful what you wish for. Personally, I'm a huge fan of it because I love to watch different teams get competitive, dabble in the postseason. But again, I was never, and I want to get your thoughts on this very quickly. I was never really a fan of it being, you make the wild card spot and it's considered a postseason. I always thought like if you win the wild card, then you're considered a playoff team. But
yeah, but like they can't like call it regular
season.
Exactly.
4 playoff teams a year. I mean, baseball is a sport that, in the history of it, there were 4 playoff teams and they'd play in a championship series and then it would be the World Series. So baseball has always been notoriously difficult to get into that sort of last game. Yeah. But you wonder what kind of impact this is going to have directly on, now that I'm thinking about it, sort of just, we've seen baseball a lot in the last little bit, try to eliminate tanking, sort of whether it's through a salary floor or through a draft lottery, which is another thing that's being discussed. But I wonder how much an expanded postseason is going to reduce that sort of thing as well. That those teams that are, right on the brink, maybe those 85, 86 win teams, there's going to be more incentive for them to stay competitive, or maybe to even add at the deadline instead of selling like we've seen them do. And postseason baseball sells. It brings in a lot of revenue. And so it might be good for some teams who are a little lower on the payroll scale, like the Oakland A's and teams like that, who are making the playoffs but are finding a little bit of difficulty to sort of compete for that World Series. Evan, I can tell you have something to add.
Yeah. Well, when you brought that up, I was thinking the Cincinnati Reds immediately. They're a team that they were considering shopping guys like Luis Castillo and Sonny Gray, and if this new playoff format is brought into the picture, they're probably going to keep those guys and then just add what they can because they have the room. It was just a matter of, do we want to retool or rebuild? And it seemed like through reports that they wanted to rebuild, but if they now are able to possibly make the playoffs, like, why not retool instead? So it definitely switches the market up entirely, because teams that were on the brink are now going to try to extend themselves to a contending team. And to Mario's point, and to like your guys' point, I think it's better that there's more teams, because at the end of the day, upsets happen regardless of if it's a 1 versus 8, a 2 versus 5. Like, stuff happens. And
the wild card team just won the World Series.
Yeah, and the wild card team beat the both beat the Astros.
Yeah, they both did.
Suck on that. But the wild card teams that both beat the Astros, they won the World Series. So like, anything can happen. And yeah, it was weird in the shortened season that certain teams got it. The TV revenue probably wasn't great, but at that time, when you're in COVID protocols or whatever, you're just like chilling at home, like whatever baseball's on, you'll watch. So, I just think, like, if there's a day where there's nothing going on, you got baseball on, like, at least just listening to it gives them revenue.
And Mateo, you brought up a terrific question about whether it eliminates. He's a great host, man. He brings up the good questions. He asks them. I got to give him credit. You bring up the great question about, is this going to eliminate tanking? And I mean, you look at what from an MLB perspective, where in this negotiation, you get the expanded playoff if it comes to fruition. You have the shortened season, which we're likely going to be seeing it maybe get cut down. I don't know the exact number, but shortened regardless. You see those two mixed together. I think it reduces I like to call it the point of no return for a lot of these rebuilding teams. Like maybe I don't know if you want to go as extreme as the Pittsburgh Pirates, but maybe the Cincinnati Reds is a perfect example, where you start off your season, you see how it goes, and you're maybe expecting to rebuild. You're in that situation. You see how it goes. You play it out. I say maybe the point of no return is probably mid-June. You realize what your team's made of, how far you can go. And I think with these two things in mind, now extends the window a little bit more. We're like, okay, that turns a little bit more into late July. And then you can see, okay, we're not on the right foot, or maybe we are on the right foot. We can kind of make a push for this, because now that we have the ability to do so, rather than it is hard shut by June. You can see your chances mathematically, because baseball, just as much as it is physical, it is a huge numbers game. You know where you are. Teams know where they are by mid-June, July. Now you're going to know where you are a little bit longer. So you have different opportunities. So if it's going to eliminate tanking, I don't think it's going to. I think tanking is going to be something of the past when we're looking at it, if you get these two factors right in this proposal. And it's something that I'm interested to see happen, because that window closing, it's going to open so many doors up to these new teams.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of impact this has on the league, and if they even need to, impose further, anti-tanking measures. Maybe we never even see the salary floor because of this. It could be a natural way of sort of increasing the competitive balance in baseball. It'll be very interesting. I know we've touched on the format a little bit. I really wasn't aware that there was an actual official format discussed.
Not like official. It seems like a general thing.
Yeah, so we've got a few things sort of that they could do. They could obviously do sort of the third wild card idea the way that Evan was proposing, or we could have maybe 2 first-round buys like we've seen in the NFL in the past. I believe 2019.
Yeah, that's what they were talking about too.
I believe 2019 was the last time we saw it in the NFL, right? Or
I think it was this year. This year was the first year that the top 2 teams didn't get a bye.
I believe the top 2 teams had a bye this year.
No, because there's 7 teams in the NFL this year. We're baseball guys. I'm pretty sure
only one team had a bye week this year. This is the first year that they've done it, because usually it is the top 2.
Exactly, yeah, which is the 16 playoffs. Oh, so maybe it was 2020 and not 2019. But
that was the last year they did it. Was 2020. This was the first year, because like Kansas City, stupidly played a playoff game.
Yeah, exactly. So could we see maybe the 2 first round bye system like we've seen in the old NFL, or could we maybe see something that was discussed last year when they were talking about expanding the postseason, where the 1 and 2 seeds are able to pick their opponents from the remaining pool, and the 3 seeds left with sort of whoever doesn't get picked. I'd be interested to see which ones you guys sort of favor, if you guys have a favorite one maybe, or if you'd like to propose something new, let's shout something out there. Mario, we'll start with you.
I know you want me to say the 1 and 2 seeds pick their opponents, because that's probably the most interesting answer on this table. But it sounds pretty cool. But at the same time, if it plays out, it's going to look pretty darn bush, if you ask me. Again, if I'm going to give you the best answer that I think is going to happen, it's got to be maybe that third wildcard team. Evan said it best in that projected proposal that's most likely going to happen if this comes to fruition. I do agree with that. You got the 2 wildcard teams, second and third play it out, and then they play the first wildcard team, and whoever wins that advances and plays the top seed. I think that's more organized. It shows you just how far off you are in that third wildcard team, where you're not given anything, you're not entitled to anything. You still have to work just like you have in previous years to get to that spot. So I'm in favor of that for that first rule with the third wildcard team. The two first round buys could potentially work, but if you want to keep it a little bit more competitive, more viewership, rather, I go with that third wildcard team, because it's going to be a dogfight between, just an extra dogfight in general in the MLB.
You got to admit, though, that the 1 and 2 seeds picking their opponent would make for some great TV.
It is great TV.
It would make for some great TV. It would be like, they'd make a whole show out of it. It would be like the draft lottery.
The best part about it would be maybe the pregame press conferences between the teams. Yeah. Like, what are they talking? Like, this guy chose me. Okay, we'll prove him wrong.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it'd be very interesting to see. Evan, let's hear what you have to say.
Well, that could blow up in their faces, because it's like, oh, you picked them and you lost.
Like, yeah, it'd be interesting too to see who's involved in that decision as well. Like, is it the manager? Is it the owners? Is it the the GM making that decision? Who's making that call?
Or like the captains of the teams.
Yeah.
But no, I do think that the first, like, I would say that the number 1 team or the number 1 seed in the NL and the AL should get a bye week, because you got to have some reward / incentive for being the best team in your league. The MLB does it. I'm not the MLB. I'm sorry. The NFL does it. We've seen like the number 1 seeds, they get a rest week. And especially in baseball, when you're playing every day, and if you're a pitcher, like, although as the top seed, you are waiting an extra 5 days, like an extra 5 days, like 10 days in total, can do so much better for your arm, eliminate injuries, especially players, like just relaxing for a second and just like cooling off your arm and not having to gun someone down at first base or try to hit a home run to save your team. But no, definitely think that could be a possibility. I'm just more in favor of the wild card teams, because, like, in all honesty, when we look at the standings, the second and third seed wild card teams are never that far off in terms of like points, like, or wins. Like, they're never that. It's not like the second place has 40, or I'm sorry, like has 85 wins and the third place has 77. Like, it's never that far off. It's maybe like 85 and 80, which isn't too bad. But I definitely like that idea better, of just playing a 3-game series with the number 1 team. Just interesting.
Yeah, no, it brings up an interesting point too of, whether or not we should have, the top team in every division that even make the playoffs at all, whether or not we'd be better off just taking, the top teams in the league record wise and sort of seeding them accordingly. I mean, last year,
that would be cool.
Evan knows it all too well with the Atlanta Braves, 88 wins and the Dodgers at 106, and the Dodgers are the wild card in that situation, right? So it brings into a question.
Advantage.
Exactly. It brings into a question how fair sort of the division system is, and if it's part of the future of this game, if they do decide to go to an expanded playoff. Evan, what do you think?
Well, look, like, that did piss me off. Like, like, I'm not gonna I am gonna sound biased. I thought we could have won that series if we had home field advantage. I mean, having those first 2 games end on walk-offs, like, if it's vice versa for us, like, and we're the team with the walk-offs, I mean, like, I think that series is not going back to, I don't think that series is going to back to LA. I think the 3 games would end in Atlanta and the Dodgers would win in 5. I just, having, like, the fact that they were exponentially better than the Braves record-wise, I think they should have been rewarded for that. It was definitely a huge, not a huge topic of discussion, but it was a topic of discussion, like, but then again, credit to the Braves, because they ended up beating the Houston Astros anyway. So it's not like it was fluke stuff and then they got like swept by Houston. No, they won the World Series. So clearly better overall. But just having home field advantage, especially now with fans this season, I mean, I've been to Dodger Stadium a fair amount of times when there's 57,000 people, and it makes not 57, like 52,000 people. And it makes a huge difference when those 40,000 are on your side. But I don't think they need to retool it, because if it was the other way around, I wouldn't be upset. So you got to keep it. You got to reward the division winners. And unfortunately, the Dodgers were put into a very rare position where they won 106 games and they still couldn't win the division. So I don't think it's happened enough to the point where MLB has to say we need to figure something out. It's like that's just the way it happened this year and it sucks. But I don't think there's anything you need to do about it or really could do about it.
That's totally fair. I don't know if Mario, if you have anything to add there, but
Yeah, I think he painted the picture quite perfectly.
Yep.
He's got the firsthand experience to back it up. A rare combo from Mr. Evans.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. So, I mean, we'll see how this sort of impacts the landscape of the league and sort of, how this works out. But the Dodgers last year, they would have been a 4 seed, right? In this setup. So they would have ended up playing the 3 seed anyway, right? So, or no, they would have been the final wild card, whatever, up the ladder sort of thing. And
are you saying like doing it just like doing playoffs just solely based off record?
I'm saying, yeah, like, you keep your NL, you keep your AL.
In the NL? Because they were
no, but I'm saying if we do keep sort of the division winners as the top 3 seeds, the Dodgers still would have been the 4 seed.
Well, yeah. Okay, you confused me there for a second. I was like, thought you were talking about just like general. I was like, I thought they were better than every other division.
No. I was suggesting maybe you get rid of not the divisions for scheduling, but you get rid of the divisions for the playoff purposes, and you just have, maybe it's the top 5 or 6, whatever.
I mean, it's whatever. It hasn't happened enough for me to really argue about it. Like,
that's fair.
It hasn't happened enough. Like,
you're not salty enough to care about it yet.
Well, no, I just know if the shoe's on the other foot, I wouldn't care.
That is fair.
The Dodgers, they still had 3 home games and they weren't able to win all 3 of them. So, like, I don't know. Like, I don't.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
it makes sense. And so just moving on, we've got let's explore a little bit about sort of what the late start just means for baseball. I mean, it's obvious that players are going to lose money, but owners are going to lose a lot of money too. Their TV deals are going to be less valuable. So, despite what they're saying about, being comfortable enough missing a month of the season or potentially even longer, the owners are also going to lose a lot of money compared to sort of what the players are going to lose as well. So is it really worth it for either party to miss games at this point with how sort of minuscule some of the differences seem a little bit? I'd like to get your opinion on whether or not this sort of drawn out delay in negotiations is really worth it for either party. Mario, we'll start with you.
Well, obviously it's not ideal for any of these guys. And I think it just goes to credit. Well, you shot yourself in the foot to start. You had to push that can down the road, like we talked about in the opening of the show, where you start negotiating after, I think, 2 months, was it? Something around there, a pretty extended amount of time. And now you're going to have to pay the price. You're not going to make much money. I wouldn't say much money. You're making tons of money, but you're making substantially less money than you would on a regular basis. So both teams are going to pay the price. Both sides are going to pay the price. And it's just the nature of the beast when you're in these negotiations. You're the reason why it's going to happen. You're the reason why this is happening. You have to pay with the consequences. And something that Major League Baseball, I guess, didn't see in hindsight. Maybe they didn't plan it or such. I'm not really inside the ears and minds of Rob Manfred and his people there, but no, it's both sides are going to come out of this with a lot of damage on their own ends. So it's never going to be a win-win when you're negotiating here.
Yeah, Evan, I don't know if you think one side is sort of, having the advantage over the other right now, but sort of where do you see?
The owners do. Like, they're owners. They have a lot of monies. Like, they don't care. Like, they personally, like, I remember, like, the Oakland Athletics owner wasn't freaking paying his minor leaguers during the pandemic, and then that became a huge issue. And the guy's worth like billions of dollars. Like, some of these owners are just cheap, which is ironic because they have a large sum of money. Like, they're still going to have a nice will when they're gone. Like, I mean,
who was it last night? Was it the Yankees owner that walked out of last night's meeting early or something?
I don't know.
There was one of the owners just got up, like, fed up and just left early. So
I didn't hear anything about that.
I'm pretty sure it was the Yankees owner or the representative for the Yankees owner, but it just shows you sort of how committed these owners really aren't, and how much they could really care less about putting a product on the field this year.
And the issue for the players is, and I'll bring it, like I talked about this at the beginning, like a guy like Walker Buehler, who easily could win the NL Cy Young this year, he could have won it last year. Like, he's probably fed up because of these arbitration rules where he's only making like $2 million, and someone of his caliber right now should be getting paid 25 million. Like, that's a large sum of money. And when you're a pitcher and you see injuries like Tommy John and guys not returning to form, or even just arm injuries, maybe even pulling a muscle in your thigh while you're winding up for a pitch, like, anything can happen and you may or may not be the same. So young players, although they have a less likely chance of getting severely hurt, they want security as quick as possible because God knows what happens, and it's not fair to the players that they're getting so undervalued. And I do agree that arbitration is way too long. I think Cody Bellinger's been in the MLB for like 6 years, and this is his last year of arbitration. Like, that just seems way too long. And we keep referring to the NHL. It's a 3-year entry level, and then the guys start getting paid. I think that's how arbitration should be: 3 years, and then if a lot, like what NHL teams do is called a bridge deal. Well, then they'll sign the guy for another 3 years, but for a lot more money. Like, I think like a guy like Walker Buehler could have been like, "Yo, you could pay me the $1.5 million now, but at my 4th year, I want 4 years at 25 million, and then I'm secured."
And in regards to like the owners and the players, them going back and forth, and obviously they're both going to lose on each of their sides because the owners are going to lose a bunch of money and the players are going to lose money as well. But if you look at it, I kind of take a glance at it this way: walk a mile in these shoes. These millionaire, billionaire dollar owners, they have no clue what it's like being some of these players. And I know I'm not going to touch upon them, all these players. Max Scherzer, he's in some reasons quite close to some of these owners in financial regard. But look at a guy like, I don't know if you remember Miss Mateo growing up, the player Daniel Norris. He was a Jays pitcher.
Yep.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Do you know what he had to go through to play professional baseball? This guy was playing professional baseball for the Jays in the system. I think he was actually not even in the minors. He was in the system with the team on the roster.
Yeah, he was on the team. Well, yeah.
And you know where he was before the game? He was living in his van.
Yep.
He made no money, very little money whatsoever. Couldn't really support anything. He couldn't travel with the team because he couldn't afford to pay the costs or anything like that. It was pretty messed up. And this guy's traveling everywhere in his little van. I believe he even had a dog, which is pretty cool. At least you got some cool company there. But no, it just goes to show the disparity between these two sides and how they're not very compassionate towards each other in regards to the owners and the players. They're not empathetic. They can't see what these players who are not even able to complain about it or can complain about it, are not even going to get their voice heard because they just don't have as much. So it's important to look at both the high money players like Max Scherzers, the Garrett Coles, who are losing money on the daily, and you got to also factor in these little guys who are like playing for maybe the Pittsburgh Pirates or some small club there and getting paid very little money because their owners are making millions and billions of dollars, but they're cheap towards the team and how they fund it. So I think Daniel Norris is just a perfect example of that. It was one that struck my mind. I don't know if you guys ever thought of it that way, but it's something that I look at it as well. And it is a bit frustrating when you take into the humanity aspect of the whole thing.
Can I make one point before you move on to the next topic?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I think this issue stems from right when guys get drafted. I mean, you see the exponential drop off between the number 1 pick and like the number 15 pick in terms of signing bonuses. Like, I think like the number 1 pick gets $1.25 million, maybe a little bit over than that. But then the number 15 pick is like at $600K. And although that is a lot of money, but when you factor in, obviously paying your agent, and then paying taxes depending on which city you're then drafted, like which team you're then drafted to, like you're not left with it, and you got to pay rent and all that. Like you're not left with a lot of extra cash.
And some of these guys have to stretch that money out. The little money that they do get, they have to stretch it out for up to like 6-7 years before they even get a major league call, right?
Yeah, so. And I think that's the issue too. And I haven't read into the whole CBA. I just don't have enough time. It's way too long. But I feel like a topic of discussion has to be like player contracts. Like there are guys that say no to the MLB because the value of their contract at the spot that they're drafted just isn't worth it. And then they go into they get redrafted and then they get slightly higher, but it's still not as great. But it's like, I have no other option. So
and players leaving for other sports too. Kyler Murray was a 1st-round pick, but there was more money in football, so he went to football, right?
I think it was also just like a more sexy. You think you'd rather be flying private your first year than flying and driving and
playing in the
bus.
Oakland A's minor league association.
No, driving on a bus and you have a piss hole on aisle 20.
Definitely in Oakland. Definitely in
Yeah,
Oakland.
I mean, it's just like I thought that was like, all right, I can make more money, I'll be more famous, and I'll be treated better.
Fair. Yeah. Very
But no,
fair.
yeah, you are right. Russell Wilson, I guess too, but he was just drafted so low
Yeah,
that it
that's
didn't
fair.
make sense at the time. But fuck, Tom Brady, Montreal
Mhm,
Expos,
mhm.
you know,
Lots
and
of
he wasn't
guys
even
who
drafted that high in the NFL. He was pick
there's
199.
there's more money and there's more, ample playing time in other
Yeah.
sports.
And I
So
think I'll say one last thing. I think the
yeah,
issue is that there's too many leagues. There's too many systems you have to go through. There's like high A, single A, double A, triple A. Like I think it should just be you start off in double A and then you go to triple A and then you go similar. I know we keep referring this to hockey. There's the ECHL, which is like the third league, the AHL, which is the second league, and then you have the NHL. And you don't see teams. I mean, you have one right now that are experiencing issues financially. Like we haven't had this issue yet in a while. So I think there's just the single A and high A. I think can go. That way, you're not like you're basically funding a team and you're losing money because no one's going to go see those guys play.
And you know what's so frustrating about those different levels is that when you're playing MLB The Show and you're stuck in double A, knocking 50, 60 bombs out of the park, you're still not even getting called up. That's the
I
most
know,
frustrating
I
thing.
know.
We could all agree on that.
Mario, why don't you tell us about your experiences on this?
Yeah.
Somebody can't get out of double A.
I can't
all
get
I'm
out
saying.
of double A.
No.
I mean, I made
Coach
it to the
hates me.
show-
I
made
burned
it
some
to the show
bridges.
in a few hours, man. Like you're just
Wait.
not good at the game.
You gotta pick Pittsburgh, get called up, and then demand a trade. That's the
Yeah.
secret.
Like get good, kid.
Gotta cheat the system a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, on that note, I think we've had a very productive discussion about the CBA negotiations. Probably a little bit better than the negotiations went between the players in the league.
Oh yeah.
So I think we've got a deal. So MLB, come to us, and we'll be in your negotiation room. We'll sort it out for you. But
Sure.
boys, thank you guys for joining me today. Great talk as usual, and stay tuned for next time for Breaking News Bears on DSN Dynasty Sports Network. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.